Welcome to Linguistics Tube. On this channel, you'll find videos about learning English, as well as more scientific videos about linguistics and psychology, and more general academic topics such as study skills, conducting research, and writing academic articles. This episode is part of my series about research skills. In general, the process of conducting research focuses on four broad areas. Firstly, the ability to gather information about a topic. Secondly, the ability to analyze and interpret the information. Thirdly, the ability to make conclusions as a result of your analysis. And finally, the ability to present your research, either through speech or writing. In this episode, I will explore the final area of conducting research, as I will guide you through the most commonly used structure for presenting research. This is the structure that is used for scientific academic articles. Through learning about each section of an academic article, we will also explore the writing process and the research process more generally. In case you don't know much about me, I'm an English teacher at a university in China, where I teach undergraduate social science students. Therefore, when writing this episode, I had in mind the kind of academic articles that my students are required to write. This is typically their very first academic article in English. However, I believe that the information in this episode will be suitable for students of other subjects at other levels of study. Therefore, I hope that this episode will tell you everything you need to know to be able to write your very first academic article as an undergraduate student. Or, if you have written them before, then it should remind you of the basic information while still giving you useful advice to improve your writing. So, let's get started. Here is the structure for this episode. It is divided into the sections that should be included in a typical academic article in the social sciences. The social sciences, by the way, are the various subjects which study societies and the people who live in them. Common social science subjects are psychology, sociology, linguistics, and anthropology. Anyway, the sections that you see on the screen, from the abstract to the conclusion, are all essential parts of a scientific academic article. Let's begin with a quick introduction before moving to the first section of an academic article. An academic article presents research that you have conducted. Therefore, it is the final stage of a research project. As a result, let's briefly discuss the process of conducting a research project. Firstly, you need to choose a topic to investigate. The most basic goal of a scientific research project is to discover something. In order to do this, your project must answer one or two questions in order to provide knowledge about something that was previously unknown, or at least not well known. These one or two questions are called research questions. You will ask them at the start of your research, and the purpose of your project is to answer them. We will discuss research questions in more detail later in this episode. After you have chosen your topic and asked your research question, you need to investigate it. In order to do this, you need to collect data. In general, there are two types of data: primary data and secondary data. In a typical scientific research project, you need to collect primary data. This is original data. Therefore, you must collect it yourself because it does not exist anywhere else. The other type of data is secondary data. This is not original data because it is data that has already been collected and already exists somewhere. For example, another researcher could publish his or her previous data online. Does this mean that you cannot use secondary data in a research project? Well, you certainly can, but only to support your findings. This is because it shows that other people agree with you, or that other data is consistent with your data, which makes your data more convincing. However, in a typical scientific research project, you cannot use someone else's data to create your findings. After you have collected your data, you will need to analyze and interpret your results. Through this, you will decide your project's main findings and conclusions. One of the most important aspects of this is to state whether or not your results answered your research questions and why. We will learn about all of this in this episode. In general, depending on the type of data that you collect, there are two types of analysis that you can use. Firstly is quantitative analysis, which focuses on numbers and statistics, and often presents the data in graphs. Secondly is qualitative analysis, which instead investigates words and meanings. Therefore, if you collect data for your research project by asking close-ended questions, whose results can be stated as numbers, then quantitative analysis will be very appropriate. On the other hand, if you get your data from open-ended interviews with lots of depth and explanation, then you will naturally analyze your data using qualitative methods. Finally, after completing the research aspect of your project, you need to present it. At university level, the most common way to do this is by writing an academic article. Of course, you could also be asked to present your research in other ways, such as a spoken presentation, or by creating a poster, but those will be a summary of a full academic article, and so they should follow the same basic structure. So, what is the structure of an academic article? How many words should it be? And what sections does it need to include? Well, very generally, if you are an undergraduate student in your second or third year of study, then you will often be required to write an academic article between 2,000 and 2,500 words. This can vary, of course, depending on the course and the nature of the assignment. If you do a postgraduate degree, such as a master's, then typical assignments require you to write an academic article of double the length. In other words, 4,000 to 5,000 words. Also, in the final year of your undergraduate degree, you will probably need to write a dissertation. This could be up to 10,000 words. Nevertheless, you should follow the same basic structure regardless of the length of the article. Let's now look at the sections that a typical academic article needs to include, and the approximate lengths of each section. When you are an undergraduate student and are required to write your first academic article, you may be a little worried about needing to write 2,500 words. However, don't worry, because as you can see, an academic article is comprised of several sections, which are all approximately 400 words. Therefore, it is not as difficult to write 2,500 words as it sounds. I'll now introduce the main sections, of which there are 6. Your article must begin with an abstract, which should be between 80 and 100 words. This is the length for the shortest and the longest academic articles. So even professional academic articles, which are 10,000 words, have an abstract of about 100 words. Next is the introduction of your academic article, which I recommend, for an undergraduate academic article, is between 470 and 550 words. After that is the method section, which is slightly shorter at 400 to 500 words. Next, you discuss your results, in only 350 to 450 words for an undergraduate academic article. After that is the discussion section, which I recommend is the same length as the method section, 400 to 500 words. Finally, you should end with a conclusion, which only needs to be 300 to 400 words for an undergraduate academic article. While the word length for an entire academic article is usually fixed, the word lengths for the 6 sections are only my recommendations. Therefore, a slightly shorter introduction than 470 words is fine, and a slightly longer discussion section than 500 words is also fine. However, please do your best to generally use these word lengths, because they represent the balance and the general importance of each section. For example, the abstract is by far the briefest section of a scientific paper, and the introduction is generally the longest, because there is a lot of information to include. Also, the results section must be as succinct as possible without unnecessary explanation, so it should never be longer than the methods or the discussion section. Therefore, overall, the weighting of each section must be maintained, even if you exceed the word limit by 50 to 100 words here and there. The 6 main sections are undoubtedly the most important and are crucial to the success of an academic article. However, there are 2 other sections which are sometimes an afterthought, but this is unfortunate because they are actually essential. They are the references section and the appendices section. The lengths of these sections vary from article to article, and so they are generally not included in the total word length of an academic article. On the previous 2 screens, I'm sure you noticed that I deliberately didn't define or explain each section. That's because this is your task. So, in our first activity, please pause the video, and using the internet, as well as the translations on the screen now if you are a Chinese speaker, I would like you to define or explain each of the 8 sections. Importantly, don't create a general definition of each section. Instead, your definition must be relevant to an academic article. Thus, for example, don't just tell me what an introduction is, tell me exactly what it is in the context of an academic article. Please pause the video now. Here are some brief definitions of each section. The abstract is a brief summary of the main sections of the article. Next is the introduction, which discusses the background of your topic and the reasons for conducting your research. Also, you must discuss the theories and previous research on your topic. Next is the method section, in which you systematically describe how you conducted your research and how you collected your data. Next is the results section, in which you concisely, systematically, and objectively describe what you found. After that is the discussion section, in which you explore and explain your most interesting results, whether they support or refute your research questions, and how your results support or refute the previous research that you discussed in the introduction. Finally is the conclusion, which should summarize your findings. After that is the references section, in which you list all the books, articles, websites, videos, and so on that you referred to in your article. Writing the references section correctly can be very difficult, and so you can find another episode in this series about referencing. And finally is the appendices, which contains the additional materials that you used in your article, such as tables, charts, interview questions, your questionnaire, and so on. Learning how to write all of these sections is the topic of this episode. Let's now discuss the first section of an academic article in detail, the abstract. The abstract, in essence, is a short summary of your academic article. Thus, it must summarize the most important aspects of the entire article. Regarding the format of the abstract, it is always only one paragraph. In all professional scientific academic articles, which are 5,000 to 10,000 words, the abstract is about 100 words. In a typical undergraduate academic article, which is around 2,500 words, there is less to summarize, so 80 to 100 words is acceptable. You might be thinking, why do I need a summary at the beginning if the conclusion is a summary of the main findings of the research project? The reason is that, for scientists, professors, and researchers who read professional academic articles, they are very busy with their own research, so they don't have much time to read articles. Thus, they certainly cannot read every single article that exists in their field. Thus, the purpose of the abstract is to allow the reader to decide quickly whether the article is relevant to his or her interests. This means that the abstract must be as attractive, efficient, and systematic as possible in order to encourage the reader to continue reading your paper. Abstracts always have the same 4 sections and use the following order. Firstly, you must begin by stating the purpose of your article very clearly. This must happen in the first or second sentence. The purpose of your article is what your project aimed to discover, or the questions that your research was designed to answer. This could be the research question that you investigated. The research question must be explored in the introduction, so you will easily be able to summarize that part of your introduction in the abstract. Next, you must clearly express the basic design of the study and the methods you used to collect your data. This will be a very brief summary of the method section of your article, in only 1 or 2 sentences. Thirdly, you will summarize the results section of your article by reporting the major results which answer your research question. This again only needs to be 1 or 2 sentences, so even though you will have many important results, you need to select your most essential findings to include here. In the final part, you must briefly summarize the discussion of your results, which will occur in the discussion section. Also, briefly state your main conclusion. To reiterate, in a real, published academic article, the reader uses the abstract to decide whether to read the entire article. So, it must be as succinct, yet as meaningful and interesting as possible, because you need to prove to him or her that your article is worth reading. Let's discuss the language and style of the abstract. Firstly, while people traditionally recommended only using the passive voice throughout an article, nowadays people like to also include the active voice, especially in the abstract, because it is the most direct and meaningful way to tell the reader the important information. Secondly, your sentences must be concise, yet full and completely grammatical. Regarding tense, you should use a combination of the past and present tenses. Use the past tense when describing what you actually did, such as a specific action that you performed, and use the present tense when stating your general purpose and findings. These will be general states that are not related to a specific time that something happened. Finally, even though you can use pictures, tables, and figures in other sections of the article, the abstract must only use text. Regarding the other side of the coin, here is the list of things that the abstract should not contain. Firstly, remember that you only have 100 words, and you have 4 key pieces of information to convey. So you must not waste words by beginning with an unnecessary opening sentence that provides background information on your topic. You can do that in your introduction instead. Next, do not discuss other studies or previous research, because the reader is only interested in your study at this point. You can save that information, again, for the introduction. Next, remember that you must use full grammatical sentences. While it is a summary, it is not the same as taking notes, where you can omit unnecessary grammar words. Finally, I should make it clear that all academic articles are not introductions to their field. Books carry out this purpose. Instead, academic articles are very specific and assume that the reader already has the basic knowledge of the field. Thus, writers use many technical terms throughout their articles. However, they are always explained properly in the introduction. Therefore, you must not fill your abstract with abbreviations or terms that are specific to your paper, because the reader might not be familiar with them. Thus, you must keep your abstract as general and introductory as possible with regards to technical language. Regarding the writing process of an academic article, many people do this linearly. In other words, they start with the first section and finish with the last. However, this is a very bad strategy. In the case of the abstract, although it is the first section of your paper, the abstract must be the final section that you write, because you cannot write it until you have written everything else, because it must summarize what you have already written. Let's now look at 2 examples of abstracts written by my students, who are undergraduate social science students at a university in China. Their academic article presented the results of a research project in which they needed to gather and analyze primary data. The first abstract is from an academic article called Depression Among University Students. This abstract is 79 words, so it is just under the recommended range of 80 to 100 words. Please pause the video and find the 4 sections of an abstract. Abstract. This article investigated university students' understanding and attitudes towards depression, as well as their ways to deal with it. An online questionnaire on depression's causes, symptoms, students' personal experience, and the university's treatment was conducted among university students. The results indicate that the majority of students lack a comprehensive understanding of depression, yet feel optimistic about its treatment. The article concludes that depression is a threat to students, so both students and universities should pay more attention to it. Notice that at the top of the abstract is the title of this section. Your academic article must contain headings and subheadings in every section to help the reader follow your ideas. We'll see this in the examples of every section of the academic article in this episode. Anyway, please pause the video now and find the 4 sections. I have highlighted the 4 sections here. The first states the purpose of the study. The second explains how the data was collected. The third presents the most important results. And the fourth states an overall conclusion along with a recommendation. Let's now have a look at an abstract from another article. Here is another abstract. It is from an academic article called Procrastination Among University Students. This abstract is slightly longer at 82 words. Again, please pause the video and find the 4 sections of an abstract. Abstract. This study investigated the prevalence of procrastination among university students, the reasons why students choose to procrastinate, and the impacts that may occur on them. Over 100 students participated in an online questionnaire. More than 80% admitted that they suffer mildly from procrastination, whereas 12% claimed that they suffer severely from it. In contrast with previous findings, 2 new reasons for procrastination emerged: poor time management and the complexity of assignments. This supports our conclusion that procrastination is universal among university students. Please pause the video and find the 4 sections. I have highlighted the 4 sections here. You are welcome to use the general structure and phrases of these 2 abstracts in order to construct your own, but ensure that you do not copy them too much. Throughout this episode, I would like you to do some activities to practice what we've learned. For this, we will use the topic, students' use of, and their attitudes towards their university canteens. Firstly, I'll show you some typical photos of a university canteen in China, where I teach, to give you some ideas. Now, please pause the video and create an abstract for this topic. Here is the information that you must include. Firstly, you used an online questionnaire to collect your data. Your participants were 100 students. The results were that the vast majority of participants are positive about the canteens, but quality of the food needs the most improvement. Finally, you recommend that the university takes action to improve the canteens. I recommend that you fit this information into the structure of one of the 2 example abstracts. Please pause the video now. Let's now discuss the second section of an academic article, the introduction. Many people struggle with the introduction and consider it to be the most difficult section of the article to write. This is probably because they do not know where to start and are unsure of exactly what to include. So let me keep it simple for you. In my opinion, the introduction must do 4 things. Firstly, it must clearly explain the topic of your study. Usually, when students are unsure of how to begin the introduction, they write extensive background information that actually wastes words. You do not need to do that here. Instead, you must be focused immediately. There is no need to be too general. We'll see some examples of this soon. Before we discuss the second aspect of the introduction, I want to remind you that, in a research project, you must collect your own original data, which is called primary data, to answer your research question. However, in a scientific study, you cannot make a solid conclusion only from your own data and your own analysis. It is necessary to also use 2 other things to support your research. Firstly, existing research on your topic. Remember that your topic doesn't need to be completely original, because almost every topic has previously been researched. Therefore, other academic articles about your topic probably exist. The second resource that you must use throughout your article is theories and models. Simply, these are an idea, or a set of ideas, that explain how something works and why something happens or exists. In the episode about writing argumentative essays, I listed several of my favourite theories, which can be used to explain general, economic, and psychological phenomena. Please have a look at that video if you'd like to learn more about theories and models. Based on this, the second section of your introduction must discuss the existing research or existing studies that share the same or very similar topic to yours. In addition, you should discuss theories or models that can support or explain important aspects of your topic. This section is called the literature review. The purpose of the literature review is to explain what knowledge already existed on your topic before you carried out your study. For each piece of existing research, or for each theory that you discuss, it is essential that you explain, in your own words, how that study is relevant to your research. There are two reasons why you need to explain what research has already been done on your topic. Firstly, it helps the reader to understand the context or background of your project, because you can provide a historical overview of the investigations into your topic over the years. For example, you can explain when interest in the topic began, which studies were especially important and influential in furthering our knowledge, and so on. The second reason for explaining what research already exists is that this can explain the reason why you are investigating your topic. In a real, published academic article, you must research something new, or in other words, something which hasn't already been published. Therefore, a literature review in a published article explains what has been done, and by doing this, it crucially reveals what hasn't been done, or what gaps exist in our understanding of the topic, and where those gaps are. Thus, a real academic article aims to fill a gap in our current understanding by explaining in the literature review what we don't currently know. Of course, in a typical research project at university, it's unlikely that you will create something completely original by filling a gap in our current knowledge. At this level, you can simply add to our existing knowledge by creating a study that confirms our current understanding of your topic. As long as you collect original data and explain what has already been done, you can get a top grade. Despite this, you will still need to explain why you are investigating this topic, even though you are not necessarily aiming to discover anything new. As I briefly mentioned on the previous screen, you will need to report the findings of several existing studies. However, you cannot only summarize them. Instead, more importantly, you must explain, in your own words, how these previous studies are relevant to your topic and how they underpin your research. We'll see examples of this soon. Returning to the four things that an introduction must do, we've learned that it must firstly explain your topic, and secondly explain what research already exists on your topic. Thirdly, you must state the purpose of your research project. You should firstly explain your purpose, and then use two additional components. The first of these is a research question, and the second is a hypothesis about what you expect to find. These components are two central aspects of any research project, so we'll talk about them in depth soon. Finally, your introduction should explain why your topic is worth investigating. In other words, you need to sell your project to the reader by explaining why your topic is interesting and why the reader should continue reading your article. Also, you must explain how your academic article will contribute to the existing knowledge in your field, ideally by justifying why it is original and fills a gap. But for this project, it's fine to explain how it cements what we currently know. In a typical undergraduate academic article that is between 2,000 and 2,500 words, The introduction section should be between 470 and 550 words. The second part, the literature review, should undoubtedly be the longest of the 4 parts. In case my explanation of those 4 parts was confusing, let me summarize it even more simply. Overall, as a whole, the introduction must be able to answer these questions. What am I investigating? Why is it an important topic? What did we know about it before I did this study? And how will my research project advance our knowledge of this topic? When I say answer these questions, I don't mean that you should literally structure your introduction with answers to these questions. I instead mean that, overall, by the end of your introduction, the information that you have shared should be able to answer these questions if the reader asked them. Regarding language, please use the present tense throughout, even when discussing existing studies from a long time ago. And regarding the style, I recommend that you divide the 4 sections of the introduction with subheadings to aid the readability of your introduction. This is especially important because this is a very long section, so one piece of 500 words might be difficult to follow. Here is our next activity, which focuses on the 2 components that can be used to express the purpose of your study. Please pause the video and define or explain research question and hypothesis. Afterwards, please create one research question and a hypothesis for the same topic about university canteens. Both research questions and hypotheses should be written after you have learned about your topic, but before you begin collecting your data, because they are essential to shaping and guiding exactly what you want to discover through your research. Your research question identifies exactly what your entire research project wants to find out, so the fundamental aim of your research is to answer your research question. In a 2,500-word academic article, between 1 and 2 research questions is enough. Longer research papers, like dissertations or real published academic articles, usually have at least 2 or 3 research questions. Importantly, as you've probably realized by now, the research question is not the same as the questions that you ask in your questionnaire. Those are very specific questions that provide the data that can be used to answer your research question. So, your research question is broader. However, it cannot be too broad because broad research questions are not easily testable. Here are some example research questions for the topic about students' use of and attitudes towards their university canteen. The best research questions are specific and focused, whereas the weakest ones are too general and vague. An example of a weak one is, what are students' attitudes towards their university canteen? Instead, you can think of that question as a very broad category, and within that are more specific questions that can be asked, which focus on different aspects of this topic. Here are some examples of better research questions. How have students' attitudes towards their canteen changed since ordering takeaway food became common? What are the main factors that influence students' attitudes towards their canteen? What is the relationship between the wealth of students and their attitudes towards their canteen? What is the role of food quality, hygiene, and value for money in determining students' attitudes towards their canteen? What are the most effective strategies to improve students' attitudes towards their canteen? What are the advantages and disadvantages of the canteen? What are the differences and similarities between students' attitudes towards their university canteen and their high school canteen? As you can see, the best research questions begin with what or how. Do not ask a question that can be answered with yes or no, and do not ask a why question, because these are usually too broad to be answered effectively through scientific research. The next component which you can use to state the purpose of your research is a hypothesis. This is an evidence-based guess which tentatively answers your question. This answer should be based on a logical analysis of your topic, as well as the findings of previous research. It is always written as a statement, which is testable through research. For example, a hypothesis for one of the research questions, what is the relationship between the wealth of students and their attitudes towards their canteen, might be that richer students have a lower opinion of the canteen, because they can easily afford to eat higher quality food in more expensive restaurants. There are three structures which you can use to state your hypothesis. Firstly, if a student has more wealth, his or her opinion of the canteens will be more negative. 2. The wealth of students has a negative effect on their opinion of the canteens. And 3. Students with more wealth will have a more negative opinion of the canteens than those with less wealth. You should use one of these three ways to state your hypothesis. Let's now look at two examples of introductions written by my students who are undergraduate social science students at a university in China. Their academic article presented the results of a research project in which they needed to gather and analyze primary data. The first introduction is from an academic article called Chinese University Students' Views of Foreign Teachers. The introduction is 538 words, so it is comfortably within my recommended word range. Please pause the video and carry out two tasks. Firstly, think about what you like about this introduction, and secondly, think about what could be improved. Section 1. Introduction. This article explores Chinese university students' expectations towards their foreign teachers, whether their expectations are being met or not, what courses they prefer to be taught by foreign teachers, and particularly, students' different attitudes towards their teachers from both inside and outside China. Section 1.1. Literature Review. In recent decades, China's universities have witnessed a significant rise in the introduction of foreign teachers into language classrooms. Research has been done by both Chinese and Western scholars, from a focus on their effect on general English teaching in Chinese classrooms to particular courses such as speaking and advanced writing. Although native speakers were traditionally considered as the only reliable source of linguistic data, and foreign teachers usually have some privilege in China, criticism of foreign teachers has emerged. As Ouyang and Dao report that Chinese students think some foreign teachers are boring and have no idea what he or she is teaching. So far, most of the research has been based on a small number of participants. In 2004, Luo and her colleagues conducted a survey on communications between foreign teachers and Chinese students in the English teaching classroom, and concluded that most students are happy with their foreign teachers. Contradictorily, Anthony and Zhang conducted an investigation on Chinese students' attitudes towards English native-speaking teachers and Chinese teachers for teaching English writing, finding that students are more willing to be taught by Chinese educators. However, both results came from a small group of participants. The former one was based on interviews with 4 foreign teachers and 100 Chinese students in the same university. the latter was based on 50 English major students from only 2 classes. It is necessary, then, to make a survey based on a wider range of participants, in order to increase the validity of their personal judgments. Additionally, as no investigations so far, to our knowledge, have examined the different attitudes and expectations between language and non-language major students towards foreign teachers, this article intends to fill a gap in our existing knowledge. Our findings are based on a questionnaire by 208 university students in China and 2 interviews with a teacher from the US and a local Chinese teacher. Section 1.2. Purpose of this study. The purpose of the article is to illustrate the problems that exist between Chinese students and their foreign teachers in the classroom, to examine language students' acceptance of foreign teachers, and to provide suggestions for both learners and educators so that more effective teaching and learning can be developed. Our central research question is: how do language and non-language major students' opinions of native-speaking teachers versus local teachers differ? Based on the conflicting nature of previous research, we are unable to formulate a hypothesis. You can see here that it is perfectly acceptable to not include a hypothesis. This is because a hypothesis must be an educated guess, based on theories and previous research, and cannot be based on your own opinions alone. However, you should not simply omit the hypothesis. You should instead explain why you haven't made one. Section 1.3. Originality of this study. Overall, we chose this topic to investigate because, due to the conflicting nature of the existing studies, it is important to get a clearer answer on the phenomenon of foreign teachers at Chinese universities. If our aims of disentangling the inconsistent research are successful, our conclusions will be among the first to provide a systematic answer on the widely held conjecture that students always prefer a native-speaking teacher. Depending on our findings, there will be wide-ranging implications for the future existence and prevalence of foreign teachers. Please pause the video and complete the 2 tasks. The first paragraph outlines the topic in a very systematic, succinct, and efficient manner. There is no unnecessary opening sentence or background information. After the first paragraph, we know exactly what this article will investigate. The next 2 paragraphs are the literature review. They are split into 2 paragraphs because they contain the 2 different goals of a literature review. The first provides a historical overview of the research, and the second part explains the limitations with the current research, which sets up the gap in our knowledge that the project aims to fill. The third paragraph explains exactly how the research project will fill the gap that they identified. The fourth paragraph explains the purpose of the study, and the 5th paragraph explains the worth of the project and how it will contribute to our existing knowledge of the topic. The strengths of this introduction are that it contains every required part of the introduction and is written in a professional, academic way, with subheadings to help us keep track of every section. It is also very systematic and does not waste words. Here is another introduction from one of my students' academic articles. The topic of this academic article is Customers' Views of Overseas Purchasing. This introduction is 551 words, so it is just above my recommended range. Please pause the video after I read it and do the same as before. Section 1. Introduction. In this report, we will examine the current situation and development of overseas purchasing in China. Specifically, our focus will be on the views of a specific group of customers, university students, who are very familiar with this phenomenon and whose views are so far unexplored in the literature. Section 1.1 Overview of existing studies. Recent years have witnessed the rise of overseas purchasing in China, of which the transaction scale leaped from less than 50 billion in 2012 to more than 75 billion in 2013. It is predicted that the number would reach 150 billion at the end of 2014. As a result of the improvement in living standards and internet infrastructure, people in China are more likely to buy overseas products of high quality and low prices than their Chinese product counterparts. Experts define it as a kind of business in which domestic buyers purchase foreign products via agents who send the purchases to customers from foreign countries, either themselves or using logistics companies, and in return charge a fee for the service. Overseas purchasing can be divided into two groups: B2C, business to customers, and C2C, customers to customers. B2C includes websites and companies which are specifically designed for the service. In contrast, international students opening an online store on Taobao.com or auctioning foreign products on eBay.com is an example of C2C overseas purchasing. The latter type is more widespread. Our research considers both types. Providing great convenience for Chinese customers and taking advantage of the internet infrastructure, i.e., auction and shopping websites, the overseas purchasing business is thriving. Zhang also points out that the generation born in the 80s and 90s is becoming the biggest consumer group for two reasons. They were born in the era of the computer and are more willing to get in touch with the outside world. Prosperous though the business seems to be, many problems have arisen. For example, there exist many fakes that deceive customers, and the changing and refunding system is open to abuse. Another serious problem is that the agents are easily able to avoid paying tax. Although the collected literature has provided a solid background on overseas purchasing, it has thus far failed to take the most essential component of the activity into consideration: the customers. Thus, this article takes a different angle from previous studies, and instead examines customers' views, and importantly, what influences them. We chose this angle because improving the industry can only occur when we have a detailed understanding of both pieces of the puzzle. Regarding the group of customers, we selected university students for several reasons. Firstly, university students' annual sum of consumption has reportedly reached 15,000 renminbi per person, 50% higher than the annual disposable income of the average urban resident. Consequently, university students are a powerful consumer group. Secondly, university students are more familiar with the internet and e-commerce than other age groups, and they have more opportunities to consume goods online. Thirdly, this group of the young generation are open-minded and more ready to accept foreign products. Section 1.2. Purpose of this research. This article aims to investigate the main factors which determine university students' opinions about the current situation and development of overseas purchasing. Thus, we identified our research question as: what are the main factors that determine students' views of overseas purchasing? We hypothesized that the trustworthiness of the agent, the rating and comments of previous customers, as well as the number of sales on his or her online shop, are the main factors determining customers' views. Section 1.3. Contribution to the field. Our article is distinct and original because the views of our chosen group have, as of now, been unexplored in the existing works on this topic. Through our findings and conclusions, we hope to provide some suggestions for the better development of this industry, both for customers and agents. Please pause the video and complete the 2 tasks. This is again a very strong introduction because it contains all the necessary parts. The first paragraph outlines the study. The second, third, fourth, and fifth paragraphs are the first part of the literature review because they provide the essential background information and definitions of key terms. The 6th, 7th, and 8th paragraphs provide the second essential aspect of a literature review, as they explain the limitations of previous research and where the gap in our knowledge exists, and how their study will fill this gap in our knowledge. The 9th paragraph states the purpose of the article, along with the research question and hypothesis, and the final paragraph justifies the unique contribution of this study to the field. I am again very happy with this introduction. If you can see any weaknesses, please write a comment below. Let's now discuss the third section of an academic article, the methods section. In the methods section, you must explain exactly how you carried out your study. You must do this in the most systematic, scientific, efficient, and descriptive style as possible. Therefore, you must avoid unnecessary explanation or colourful language in this section. The methods section has 4 components, and you should write them in the following order. Firstly, you must describe the group of people that you investigated. You will need to give your participants a label, such as students, teenagers, grandparents, office workers, cleaners, or delivery people. Also, you should state the number of participants and any other information that is important for your study, such as their ages. Regarding the number of participants, the general principle for quantitative research is that the minimum number of participants from which to make valid conclusions is 30 for each group. Therefore, you would need to conduct 30 questionnaires, for example. Regarding qualitative research, the minimum number is 5 participants. So, you would need to conduct 5 interviews, for example. Secondly, you must describe when and where you collected your data. This is simply the location and the time that your data collection occurred. Including this in the methods section is important because the information that you get from this group of people may change depending on when and where you gather your data. For example, if we know that you collected data from 100 18-year-old students in 2015, then another study in 2020 could repeat your study by interviewing another group of 100 18-year-old students and see whether those 5 years caused a difference in the opinions of 18-year-old students. Also, if your group of 100 18-year-old students were tested in Shanghai, their opinions might be related to the fact that they live in Shanghai. Therefore, the same type of participants might respond differently if they live in Beijing. Another reason that including when and where your data collection took place is that real scientific articles are usually published 2 to 3 years after the study happened, so it's important to give the reader as much context as possible. Thirdly, you should describe how you collected your data, how you constructed your data collection method, and why you chose this method of data collection. If you are planning to conduct online questionnaires, which are by far the most convenient method nowadays, then you will need to explain which website or app you published your questionnaire on, which types of questions you included in the questionnaire, look again at the episode about questionnaires to remind yourself, and why you decided that a questionnaire, especially online, was the best way to get your data. In contrast, if your topic requires you instead to do face-to-face interviews, then you will need to describe the setting in which they were conducted, how and why you chose which questions to ask, why you decided to collect data on these specific topics, why you decided that interviews were better than questionnaires, and any other important information such as the length of the interviews, and whether you interviewed one person at a time or several people together. Finally, you should describe how you analyzed your data. For example, you might have used a website to create graphs and tables, or you might have analyzed everything by hand. Even though you should describe what types of analysis you conducted, you must not discuss your findings here. You'll do that in the next section. My recommendation is that, in a typical undergraduate academic article that is between 2,000 and 2,500 words, the method section should be between 400 and 500 words. Regarding the language and style of this section, please use the past tense when describing what you did. Also, even though I previously said that the active voice is becoming more common in academic articles, in the method section, the convention is to only use the passive voice. Here is an example of both of these requirements. You should say, the participants were asked to fill in the questionnaire, which can be found in Appendix 1. Instead of, we will ask the participants to fill in the questionnaire, which you can find in Appendix 1. Some students use future tense here because they think of the article as telling the reader what they will do. So they use sentences like, we will investigate this, we will ask participants to do this, we will find this in our results. But you should not do this. Instead, your academic article must report to the reader what you did, not what you will do. One of the goals of a scientific academic article is that it should be replicatable. In other words, it must be possible for other people to read your article and then have enough information to be able to repeat your study. And to be able to repeat your study, they must rely especially on the method section, because this is essentially a set of instructions on how to perform your study exactly as you did it. Therefore, if I had to give you only one piece of advice for this section, it would be that you must describe everything you did in enough detail for other people to repeat your study in the future. However, you must find a balance between giving the readers everything they need and also being succinct and not including unnecessary details. Give them everything they need to repeat your study and nothing else. Let's now look at two examples of method sections written by my students who are undergraduate social science students at a university in China. The first method section is from an academic article called The Status of Students' Mental Health. It is 430 words, so it is comfortably within my recommended word range. Please pause the video and carry out two tasks. Firstly, think about what you like about this method section, and secondly, think about what could be improved. Section 2. Methods. Section 2.1. Participants. To investigate Chinese university students' mental health state, 243 students were involved in our investigation. To ensure the results are of a high validity, the students that were targeted were from a range of grades, from first grade to fourth grade undergraduate students, and also MA and PhD postgraduate students. Also, the participants were ensured to be students at a number of universities throughout Guangzhou, a city in South China. Section 2.2. Location and time of data collection. A questionnaire was chosen as the form of data collection. For the convenience of both the researchers and participants, it was disseminated online rather than physically. The questionnaire was constructed and published on Wenjuan, a mini-program on WeChat. It was shared on the researchers' WeChat moments and in various WeChat groups for university students. It was available for 1 week, from May 14th to May 20th, 2019, and took approximately 15 minutes to complete. As a reward, a game was available upon completion, which gave the participant the opportunity to win hongbao with amounts of 0.1 to 0.9 RMB. Section 2.3. Method of data collection. A questionnaire was chosen as the data collection method because of its convenience and the fact that a large sample can be collected and analyzed, thus increasing the validity of the results. The questions that were asked included the following aspects: personal mental state, the frequency of feeling negative, sources of negative emotions, the effect of negative emotions, and ways to deal with negative emotions. These aspects were chosen in order to investigate the presence and effect of negative emotions among university students, students' emphasis on the negative emotions, and their ways to deal with them. The types of questions included multiple choice questions, such as, what is your most common state of mind at university? Frequency questions, such as, how often do you feel negative? And Likert scale questions, such as, how much do negative emotions affect you? Students who made the choice of hardly feeling negative were considered as mentally healthy by us, and only needed to answer the questions about the personal mental state and frequency of feeling negative. Section 2.4. Method of Analysis. After the completion of the survey, the questionnaire data were downloaded from the website. Firstly, the data concerning personal mental state were categorized into 2 broad groups: negative mental state and positive mental state. These 2 groups were analyzed separately in order to understand the status of university students' general mental state. Microsoft Excel was then used to create tables and charts and conduct statistical analyses such as percentages. Please pause the video and complete the 2 tasks. Overall, this is an excellent method section that contains all the required information. Its writing style is systematic, succinct, and descriptive, and it finds a nice balance between providing enough detail and not wasting words with unnecessary details. If you can find any weaknesses, then please let me know in the comments below. Here is another method section from one of my students' academic articles. The topic of this academic article is depression among university students, which is taken from the same academic article as one of the abstracts we saw. The method section is 402 words, so it is just inside my recommended range. Please pause the video after I read it and do the same as before. Section 2. Methods. Section 2.1. Participants. Students at Guangdong University of Foreign Studies, GDUFS, a university in Guangzhou, China, were invited to fill in a questionnaire. It was originally in Chinese, but a translated version is attached in Appendix 1. A total of 208 students participated in the survey, all of whom were in their 2nd year of study. They studied a range of majors, from English to law. students from only one university were chosen because the researchers, as students of the university themselves, were very familiar with the studying and living conditions there, and so could easily relate the answers and suggest workable solutions. Secondly, an interview was conducted with the university's psychological counsellor about the condition of recent psychological consultations at GDUFS. Section 2.2. Location and time of data collection. For the online questionnaire, the website sojump.com was used to design, publicize, and collect the information. The completed questionnaire was distributed through WeChat groups and moments, and was available for completion for 1 month, May 2017. The interview with the university counsellor took place in May 2017. All 4 researchers were present to ask questions, record the interview, and take notes. In total, it lasted approximately 45 minutes. The audio was later transcribed and analysed. Section 2.3. Method of data collection. Questionnaires were used to collect students' views because they would be easy to collect and analyse. The content was categorized into personal experience, such as feeling depressed and having difficulty studying, causes of depression, some of which might be neglected by university students, symptoms or omens of depression, such as insomnia and suicidal tendency, action by the university that might affect students' behavior, such as publicity and education activities about depression, and students' attitudes towards depression, such as whether depression is curable. The types of questions included binary questions, such as, do you often feel depressed? Checklist questions, such as, what might be the causes of depression? Frequency questions, such as, how often do you suffer from insomnia? Likert scale questions, such as, depression is impossible to be healed. Tick the answer that corresponds with your level of agreement. And open-ended questions, such as, what would you do if you had depression? Section 2.4. Method of Analysis. Upon completion of the questionnaire, the website sojump.com performed basic analyses of the data, such as calculating percentages, drawing charts, and creating tables. These were then downloaded, and further analysis was undertaken by the researchers. Please pause the video and complete the 2 tasks. This is another great methods section that contains all the required information. One big difference between the 2 methods sections is that this one only investigated students at one university, whereas the first example gathered the views of students from a range of universities. There are advantages and disadvantages of both, which you will need to consider in your study. For example, only investigating students at one university means that all of your students will be very similar, so we can be sure that whatever results you find are certainly true for the situation at that university. But investigating a wide range of students means that your results are more reliable because your findings are more applicable to students at more universities than those you investigated. So, you need to decide which advantage is more important to your study when deciding who to investigate. In the next section of this episode, we will examine the 4th section of an academic article, the results section. In the results section, you present and describe the results of the analysis of your data. Like with the methods section, this section must be written as objectively and as simply as possible. In order to present your data in the most efficient and effective way possible, it is crucial that you use both text and tables and figures and present them in the most logical order. I'm sure you've heard of tables before, but what exactly are figures? Pause the video now and find out what a figure is. A figure is a diagram which helps us to show or explain information. The most common form is graphs and charts. Even though you must use a combination of text, tables, and figures, you must not overuse tables and figures. In other words, the bulk of your analysis must be within the text. Therefore, the role of tables and figures is to support the analysis that appears in your text, not replace the analysis in your text. This means that you should only refer to the tables and figures when necessary. The reason I told you this is because it is easy to over-rely on tables and figures, perhaps as a form of laziness. Thus, in the past, some of my students put a huge table in their results section and simply wrote, "Please look at this table to see my results." This is an example of a table replacing your analysis. Instead, a table can support your analysis by containing some precise information which you will refer to and describe in detail in the text. We'll see how to do this in the examples soon. Remember that the results section must be as objective and simple as possible. This means that you must also include negative results. This term refers to the results which don't support what you wanted or expected to find, which you stated in your hypothesis. Negative results are very frustrating because they might mean that your hypothesis is incorrect. However, I promise that there is nothing wrong with negative results, nor your hypothesis being incorrect. In fact, important advancements in our knowledge of the world often happen as a result of unexpected or contradictory results. So, even though your hypothesis might be incorrect, it does not lower the quality of your study, because perhaps the results you do find are even more interesting and significant than what you expected to find. And this might advance the field in a more substantial way. Sometimes, researchers change their hypothesis after realizing that their results didn't support their original hypothesis, but this is neither scientific nor objective. I promise that you can get a top grade in your university assignment, even if your hypothesis is completely unsupported. To get a top grade in this situation, you will need to explore, in the discussion section, the possible reasons for the negative results, suggest ways to improve your hypothesis, and also discuss why the results you did find are still interesting, noteworthy, and improve our understanding of your topic. The most important advice I can give you regarding the results section is that you must only describe your results. It is very easy to interpret or explain your results in this section, but that is absolutely incorrect. Instead, the next section of an academic article, the discussion section, is dedicated to interpreting and explaining your results. Therefore, in other words, in the results section, you describe what you found, and in the discussion section, you explain how and why your results are interesting. You might be wondering what exactly is the difference between description and interpretation. Well, some examples of interpretation include explaining which results are important and unimportant, or which results are interesting and uninteresting. Another example would be explaining which results support or refute your hypothesis and the existing research on your topic, and which results answer or do not answer your research question. However, in this section, you must not make these kinds of judgments by relating the results to the wider goal of answering your research question. Instead, your subjective interpretation will occur in the next section. For a typical academic article at undergraduate level, which is 2,000 to 2,500 words, the results section should be between 350 and 450 words. Your writing must be succinct and direct. So if you write less than 350 words, your writing is probably too succinct and lacks sufficient depth. And if you write more than 450 words, your writing is probably not succinct enough. Regarding the language, I recommend the use of the present tense only. Also, you can use both the passive and active voices, depending on what sounds the most natural. If your research project relies on quantitative methods of analysis, such as if you collected your data using questionnaires, then you will need to use some data analysis methods. Real, published academic articles use a range of very difficult statistics. You may have used or heard of some of them before. The two most common methods of statistical analysis are ANOVA and statistical significance. At master's level, you will probably need to use these forms of analysis in your postgraduate academic articles. However, at undergraduate level, you probably do not need to use those. Nevertheless, you should still use some basic statistics. Therefore, if appropriate, you should use easier statistics like percentages, the mean, and standard deviation. I'll remind you of these now. Let's start with a reminder of percentages through an activity that focuses on their use in the results section. A common problem in my students' academic articles is that they use the original raw numbers when reporting their results, instead of percentages. This is often difficult to fully understand, because the reader must mentally convert these numbers into percentages while reading the article. Therefore, you must convert all your results to percentages and only use the percentages throughout the academic article. To ensure you know how to do this, here is a quick activity for you. On the next page is a graph that contains the original numbers. Please pause the video and convert the numbers on the graph into percentages. Use 2 decimal places. Please pause the video and complete this activity. And here are the answers. Note that 25% contains 2 decimal places, even though they are 00. This is the convention, so we must follow it. Here is your second task. Let's say that I asked 11 of my friends, how many followers do you have on Twitter? Here are their answers: 57, 40, 103, 234, 93, 53, 116, 98, 108, 121, and 22. Please pause the video and do 2 things. Firstly, calculate the mean number of friends, and secondly, calculate the standard deviation of the mean. Here are the answers. The mean is 95.00 and the standard deviation is 56.79. You could calculate these statistics manually, but that would take a very long time. So instead, I recommend you use software or a website. Personally, I use Microsoft Excel to calculate my simple statistics. If you also use Excel, then these are the calculations. For the mean, type equal, average, then the open bracket, and select the numbers that you want to calculate. For the standard deviation, type equal, STDEV, then the open bracket, and select the numbers that you want to calculate. That might sound complicated if you have never used Excel, but after a while, it is very simple. Here is one more example. Let's say that there are two teachers in the linguistics department at a university who both teach the course about research skills. Let's call them A and B. I asked 5 of their students to rate them on a 5-point Likert scale, 1 being worst and 5 being best. You can see the scores on the screen. Please pause the video now and answer these 3 questions. Firstly, calculate the mean score for each teacher. Then, calculate the standard deviation of the mean. Finally, think about why the mean and the standard deviation are useful. The means are both 2.60, but the standard deviations are very different. 0.55 for A and 1.82 for B. From this, we can conclude that the mean is useful because it summarizes several numbers into only one value, and standard deviation is useful because, without it, it seems that the quality of both A and B's lessons and the teaching style is identical. But actually, if one teacher has a smaller standard deviation, we can be confident that his or her average score is valid because students' opinions of him or her are very consistent. On the other hand, if the teacher has a large standard deviation, we are less confident about the validity of the average score because it means that some students think the teacher is excellent, whereas others think he or she is terrible. Therefore, we can make different conclusions about the quality of each teacher based on the standard deviation. Let's now look at 2 examples of results sections written by my students, who are undergraduate social science students at a university in China. The first one is from the same academic article whose introduction we already saw: Chinese university students' views of foreign teachers. It is 432 words, so it is comfortably within the recommended range of 350 to 450 words. Please pause the video and carry out 2 tasks. Firstly, think about what you like about this results section, and secondly, think about what could be improved. Section 3. Results. As shown in graphs 1 and 2, students have high expectations of foreign teachers' courses. Nearly 70% are glad and expectant before taking the course. Most of them want to improve their speaking, 82.21%, and listening skills, 72.12%, and they also look forward to experiencing a different way of thinking, 72.60%, and experiencing different cultures, 69.23%. However, although many students hold that foreign teachers' courses are above their expectations and satisfying, more than half of them think their foreign teachers' course is not what they expected. Over 50% see it as just so-so or dissatisfying. As for the reason, Table 1, all the non-language students owe it to communication difficulty and partly to the difficulty of adapting to the foreign teacher's teaching method, while the language students think it's mainly because of the different teaching method. Regarding evaluations of foreign teachers' courses, on the bright side, graph 3, students think that it provides them with a more open language environment, 61.54%, widens their cultural horizons, 55.29%, and improves their language skills. However, on the dark side, graph 4, more than half, 52.88%, think their foreign teacher does not have a clear idea of what his or her students actually need and want. In terms of comprehension, there does not appear to be a language barrier, as over 80% of students can basically understand native-speaking teachers. Graph 5. A great difference lies between the kinds of courses taught by foreign teachers that students have taken before and the courses they prefer to have in the future. As Graph 6 shows, listening, writing, and foreign culture courses are the major ones that students have taken before. But as for the courses they are willing to take in the future, the most popular one is foreign culture, 67.79%, followed by speaking and communication, 61.06%, pronunciation and intonation, 58.65%, and listening, 50.48%. Nevertheless, a slight drop appears in students' expectations of writing classes. Nearly 90% of students also see a difference between courses taught by a foreign teacher and a Chinese teacher. The most distinguishing features, as Graph 7 shows, are the atmosphere of their classes and their teaching method. When asked who would help better in a language classroom, the language students and non-language students responded very differently, Graph 8. While most of the non-language students, 60.67%, think a foreign teacher would benefit them more than a Chinese teacher in the language class, the language students, 43.70%, tend to consider a Chinese teacher to be more helpful. Please pause the video and complete the two tasks. Overall, this is an excellent results section that follows the required style and has a great balance between being succinct and detailed. An especially excellent aspect of this results section is that the writer does not flood the main text with percentages, and instead puts them in brackets within the text. Then, when the writer refers to them in the main text, he or she uses more general words. This is much easier for the reader to follow and understand. For example, in the first paragraph, the writer says, most of them want to improve their speaking, 82.21%, and listening skills, 72.12%. The writer uses most of them to more generally refer to the percentages, then puts the percentages in brackets. Thus, the reader is not distracted from the main message by the percentages. Instead, the writer could have written, 82.21% of them want to improve their speaking skills, and 72.12% want to improve their listening skills. But this is more distracting, as the detailed percentages interrupt the flow and the overall understanding of the text. However, this results section is not perfect. I have 4 main suggestions for improvement. Firstly, I believe there are too many graphs. Thus, you must select the graphs you want to use very carefully. 5 figures is the most you should use. Secondly, in Graph 5, the colors are not clear enough because the blues are too similar. Thus, ensure you use very different, distinct colors in your graphs. Thirdly, some of the information is unclear to me. For example, I do not understand the point of Graph 6, and for the paragraph, a great difference lies between, the writer should have briefly explained the point of this question. For example, if the numbers are similar between the courses taken before and the ones the students want to take in the future, does that suggest that the foreign teacher's teaching was successful? And does it suggest it was unsuccessful if there is a big drop between the courses taken before and whether the students want to take it in the future? Fourthly, the information in the second half of paragraph 1 does not appear in graphs 1 or 2, nor does it appear in any of the other graphs. Thus, perhaps a graph is missing. So, you must check very carefully to ensure that, if you refer to a graph to support your explanation, the graph must be correct. Here is the second results section that we'll look at. It is from the same academic article whose methods section we already saw. Chinese university students' mental health state. This results section is 349 words, which is just under my recommended word range. However, that is only a recommendation, so there is nothing inherently wrong with this, as long as it feels complete and detailed. Please pause the video after I read it, and carry out the same 2 tasks as before. Section 3. Results. Section 3.1. University students' general mental state. In terms of the general state of university students' mental health, as can be seen in Figure 1, about 2/3, 63.83%, of students experience negative emotions, such as feeling lost, anxious, and depressed. In contrast, just over 1/3, 36.17%, experience positive emotions, such as feeling purposeful, comfortable, and calm. Therefore, among university students, negative emotions are more common than positive ones. Following on from this, Figure 2 explores the frequency and prevalence of students' negative emotions. It shows that most students experience negative emotions in their daily lives, while only a handful, 6.56%, rarely feel negative. About a quarter, 26.75%, feel negative once or twice a week, and nearly half, 48.56%, of them experience negative emotions once or twice a week. Moreover, almost 1/5, 18.11%, of students feel negative every day. The effects of negative emotions on students are shown in Figure 3. Most students, 72.13%, think that negative emotions affect the quality of their work and study, whereas for 1/5, 20.26% of them, negative emotions only have a minor effect on their daily life, such as causing mood swings. However, a small number of students, 6.61%, are strongly affected by their negative feelings. Section 3.2. Sources of and solutions to negative emotions. University students' negative emotions come from a variety of sources. In Figure 4, well over 1/3, 38.8%, blame stress caused by their academic life, and over a quarter, 27.22%, of students' negative emotions are caused by personal relationship problems. About 1/5, 21.04%, of their negative feelings are due to employment pressure, whereas just over 1/10, 12.94%, are caused by students' love life. Regarding potential solutions to these problems, as seen in Figure 5, most students, 37.87%, choose to find an outlet to distract them. Next, at just over 1/3, is the choice of talking with others, 35.20%. The strategy used by more than 1/5, 21.07%, of students is to bottle up their negative emotions, thus finding no outlet for them. The least used strategy, 5.86%, to solve the problem is to seek help from experts, such as psychiatrists and counselors. Please pause the video and complete the 2 tasks. This results section is excellent in every way. It is detailed and feels complete, despite being at the lower end of the word range. It again uses the strategy of putting the detailed numbers in brackets so as not to distract the reader. This strategy achieves maximum readability, so I recommend you follow this too. If you can see any weaknesses, please write a comment below. Let's now move on to the 5th section of an academic article, the discussion section. As the name suggests, in the discussion section, you discuss your results. By discuss, I mean that you should interpret and explain them. This is the section where you can insert your opinion, in contrast with the results section, which must be as objective, balanced, and unbiased as possible. In the discussion section, you explain which results are important and unimportant, which results are interesting and uninteresting, which results support or refute your hypothesis and the existing research on your topic, and which results answer or do not answer your research question. Throughout this section, you can discuss negative results where appropriate. Specifically, the discussion section should have 4 components. I'll now share those with you in the order that you should write them. Firstly, you must discuss whether your results answer your research question or questions, and support or refute your hypothesis. In the next subsection, you should connect the beginning and end of your report by relating your findings to the existing research that you reviewed in the literature review section of the introduction. This is crucial in order to explain whether your results fit into the existing knowledge about the topic. And if they do fit in, you should explain how they support the previous studies, and if they don't fit in, then explain how and why they refute our current understanding of the field. Thirdly, you should highlight and explore any results which you think are particularly interesting. Even more interesting would be any results that you didn't expect to find, because they could open up new avenues of exploration in your topic, or in rare cases, fundamentally shift our basic understanding of your topic in a new direction. Fourthly, you should end this section by explaining how your results change and hopefully add to our understanding of your topic. In other words, justify to the reader why your study is important to the field. Overall, as a whole, your discussion section must be able to answer these questions. Do your results answer your research question, and do they prove that your hypothesis is correct? If not, how can you explain this? Is it because your results were unexpected, or is there a problem with the methods you used? Do your results agree with the results of previous studies? If not, how can you explain this? Is it because the previous studies are weak, or is there a problem with your study? Finally, what is our new understanding of your topic? Like with my advice for the introduction section, when I say answer these questions, I don't mean that the way you structure your discussion section should answer these questions. I instead mean that, overall, by the end of your discussion, the information that you have shared should be able to answer these questions if the reader asked them. Regarding the length, I recommend that your discussion section should be 400 to 500 words in a typical undergraduate academic article. In terms of language, I suggest you mostly use the active voice and the present tense. You should use the active voice in this section because the active voice shows that the ideas and opinions are yours. In other words, by using I and we, you claim ownership of your ideas. This is why, even though the convention is to minimize the use of the first person in academic articles, you can certainly use it more in the discussion section than any other section. The final piece of advice I can share is to remind you that while the results and discussion sections are 2 sides of the same coin, they are 2 very different sides. Thus, while the discussion section is obviously related to the results section, you should not waste words by restating the results that you already shared in the previous section. Instead, assume that the reader has recently read your results section and is familiar with it. Nevertheless, if you do want to remind the reader of an important result, then do it as succinctly and broadly as possible, using general statements. Do not repeat statistics or numbers. Remember, the aims of the two sections are very different, even though they are both related to your results. The former section states your results objectively and without bias, and the latter section allows you to explore whatever you want, and bring in your own opinions and previous research on the topic. Do not mix the goals of the two sections together. Let's now look at an example of a discussion section from a previous student. The academic article it is from is called Independent Bookstores Stop the Decline and Secure Their Future. It is 556 words, which is above my recommended length of 400 to 500 words. However, it is not a problem because that is only a suggestion. Please pause the video and carry out two tasks. Firstly, think about what you like about this discussion section, and secondly, think about what could be improved. Section 4. Discussion. Section 4.1. Research question and hypothesis. Based on our review of existing articles on the current state of independent bookstores, our research question asked, what are the most effective strategies to stop the decline and secure the future of independent bookstores? Also, as a result of the research into them up to this point, we tentatively hypothesized that the price and convenience of online shopping are the biggest threats to independent bookstores. So the most effective strategies to help them are for customers to use the bookstore's own online shop, and for the shops themselves to create incentives for customers, such as lower prices, promotions, and loyalty schemes. As a result of our interviews with bookstore managers, questionnaires given to customers, and the subsequent analysis, it is clear that our hypothesis is supported. A multi-pronged approach from both customers and managers is required to improve the situation. Thus, through our analysis, our research question has been confidently answered. See subsection 4.3 for more details. Section 4.2. Existing research. As outlined in our literature review, our research is in line with the current findings on the state of independent bookstores, notably that they are endangered. Huang, 2013, previously highlighted that, between 2001 and 2004, more than 70% of the independent bookstores in mainland China shut down. Our interviews with bookstore managers confirm that independent bookstores are continuing to close across the country. Next, as Osnos stated, the biggest reasons for this are the prevalence of buying books online and using e-books instead of traditional paper ones. According to the results of our questionnaire, these are still the biggest reasons why participants do not shop in independent bookstores. Section 4.3. Major findings. As predicted by our hypothesis, it's clear that independent bookstores have failed to adapt to changing technology and lifestyles. Our questionnaire results reveal that people do not shop in them for several reasons, the most important being the price and convenience of online shopping and ebooks versus bookstores. What was unexpected, though, was that one of our assumptions turned out to be wrong. We thought that people do not enjoy visiting bookstores, thinking them to be old-fashioned and without a purpose in today's world. However, our participants still hold very positive attitudes towards these bookstores and do not wish them to disappear. It is clear then that the potential exists for the situation to be turned around if the right strategies are implemented by the bookstores. For instance, one manager told us that sales have increased significantly after reforms were implemented, such as more competitive prices, promotional offers and discounts, loyalty schemes for frequent customers, and a website for purchasing their books. Another manager mentioned that incorporating a coffee shop into her bookstore, in which people can read the shop's books, significantly increased footfall and sales. Section 4.4. Contribution to the field. Our research slots into the gap that we identified in the literature snugly, as no previous studies, to our knowledge, have specifically asked both customers and bookstore managers on the best strategies to be able to stop the decline. Because of this, our study provides information about the topic that was not previously available. Thus, we hope that our study will contribute to the field in a meaningful way, and that the bookstores will be able to adopt our suggested reforms in order to secure a sustainable and prosperous future. Please pause the video and complete the 2 tasks. This is a great discussion section, which is structured using the 4 required parts. Firstly, it discusses whether the results support the hypothesis and research question. It relates the results to the existing research. It highlights particularly interesting results, and explains how the results change our knowledge of the topic. If you can see any areas for improvement, please write a comment on this video. We've now reached the final major section of an academic article, the conclusion. After this, there are 2 more minor sections, which we'll discuss at the end of this episode. For every other major section of an academic article, I have told you the parts that they must contain. Each of those parts is compulsory. However, with the conclusion, you have some flexibility regarding which sections to include. You can make the decision based on your topic's requirements. So, let's have a look at the sections now. There is 1 essential section and 3 optional ones. I recommend that you include at least 1 of the optional sections. The essential one, as you can imagine, is a summary of the most important results of your study. One piece of advice I can give you is a mistake that many people make. You must not discuss anything new about your results in the summary. In other words, you must not include anything that you did not write in the results or discussion sections. Let's now look at the 3 optional sections, of which I recommend that you include at least 1 in your conclusion section. Firstly is the limitations of your study. You should comment on these and suggest how you would fix them if you performed the study again. This will give advice to future researchers regarding how to improve upon your research design and methods. In the second optional section, you should give your recommendations to the reader. Specifically, you should explain what should be done, what needs to change, as a result of your findings and conclusions. Finally, you can include a section commonly referred to as future directions. Here, you should give future researchers ideas for further research on your topic, perhaps to answer questions that your study raised, to fix limitations with your study, or simply to expand on your results. Regarding the length of this section, a solid conclusion can be written in 300 to 400 words. This will be very easy if you include some or all of the optional sections. Finally, regarding language, you should use both present and past tense when appropriate. Let's now look at 2 examples of conclusions written by my students who are undergraduate social science students at a university in China. In the first, the academic article is called Maintenance of Long-Distance Relationships, 3 key components. It is 317 words. Pause the video and think about what you like about it, and think about what could be improved. Section 5. Conclusion. Section 5.1. Summary. Maintaining long-distance relationships, LDRs, causes many demanding challenges, the two most important for couples being physical distance and the lack of intimacy. However, as outlined in our hypothesis and supported by our subsequent analysis, LDRs do work under certain circumstances. In all the successful cases we discovered, they meet 3 requirements, which we conclude are essential to maintaining long-distance relationships: having a bright endpoint, a solid foundation, and sufficient communication. A bright endpoint, as well as essential motivation, is vital in LDRs, as opposed to short-distance relationships, where the SDR couples whom we interviewed did not perceive this as an important ingredient for the maintenance of their relationship. Secondly, having a solid foundation is important as it is the basis of essential elements in a relationship, such as respect, care, affection, and confidence. Finally, sufficient communication minimizes the confines of the distance and also solves conflicts. Thus, our recommendations to LDR couples are to inject these 3 requirements into their relationships to substantially increase the likelihood of success. Section 5.2. Future directions. Even though our study has provided a substantial contribution to the topic and has advanced our knowledge of LDRs, we can identify several areas for further investigation. Firstly, while our findings shed light onto the successful maintenance of LDRs through the identification of 3 key components, it is clear that there are other elements affecting long-distance relationships which we didn't have the opportunity to explore. Future studies can interview more LDR couples to discover the additional ingredients that lead to the success of their relationships. Secondly, during our research, we discovered many cases where couples survived their LDRs, but when they were eventually back together, their relationship failed. This was an unexpected finding that we did not have time to explore in our study. Therefore, future studies on this topic can focus on the reasons for this and give suggestions to couples to prevent this. Please pause the video and complete the 2 tasks. This conclusion section contains just one of the optional sections, but that is absolutely fine. It is within the word limit and feels complete. Limitations and recommendations sections could be added, but it does not seem necessary in this case. In the second conclusion, which is taken from the academic article entitled "Depression Among University Students," please pause the video and perform the same 2 tasks. By the way, it is 332 words. Section 5. Conclusion. Section 5.1. Summary. This article has examined university students' understanding and attitudes towards depression and their ways to deal with it. Through our questionnaires and interviews, we can conclude that university students lack a comprehensive understanding of the causes, warning signs, and symptoms of depression. In addition, they ignore the fact that depression is a very real threat to our lives, such as causing high rates of suicide among university students. However, they are optimistic about the treatments for depression.
As a result of our findings, we conclude that depression is a danger to students, so both students and universities should become more aware of it and pay more attention to both its prevention and cure. Section 5.2. Recommendations. As a result of our conclusions, we recommend that students should hold a positive attitude towards life and try to share their sorrows with their friends and family when they occur. In addition, if students find that their friends often feel depressed, they should help them get through the dilemma. What's more, universities have traditionally paid little attention to students' mental health, but we believe this must change in the future. Thus, we recommend that they pay more attention to depression by growing students' awareness of it through giving lectures on its prevention and cure, offering useful advice to students with the potential to develop depression, and providing counselors and therapists to students in need. Section 5.3. Future Directions. Our study is one of the first to investigate Chinese university students' understanding and attitudes towards depression. As this is a relatively unexplored area, there are several avenues of investigation for further studies to explore. Firstly, in order to develop a deeper understanding of depression in this context, more types of participants could be interviewed, such as the university policymakers, who can authorize lectures and awareness-building campaigns. Secondly, in order to know more about the range of treatment options for depression, researchers should interview psychiatrists to better understand how to help university students in need. Please pause the video and complete the 2 tasks. This conclusion contains 2 of the optional sections. It again feels comprehensive and complete, and its ending is satisfying. We've finished our discussion of the main sections of an academic article. We'll now briefly look at 2 final sections that, while less important, are still compulsory in any research report. The 2 additional sections at the end of an academic article are the references section and the appendices. Regarding the first section, you can learn about it in detail in another episode on my channel. Just search for referencing. But basically, I can tell you that it contains a list of all the sources that you used in your academic article. Sources are where you get your information from, such as websites, books, videos, and other academic articles. You will refer to a lot of sources in the literature review and the discussion sections, for example. Finally, in appendices, you should include all the extra information that you didn't include within the report sections. Each piece of extra information will be in a separate appendix section, and each of these sections must be numbered. For example, you must include your questionnaire, your interview questions, any photos you took to help with your project, tables and figures that you created during your data analysis. The appendices shouldn't be an afterthought. On the contrary, you should refer to the appendices during your academic article, when appropriate. For example, if you refer to photographs during your method section, then do not put them in the method section. Instead, say, "See Appendix 2 for these photographs." We've come to the end of this episode. The information that I have included here should give you everything you need to know about writing a typical academic article in your undergraduate degree. However, you might need additional information and explanation for your undergraduate dissertation, or for postgraduate academic articles. For those assignments, then the websites you can see now are my favorite explanations of how to write academic articles and dissertations. I'm confident that all your questions and problems can be answered by reading these. But of course, if you still have additional problems, then please write a comment below or send me a message, and I'll do my best to help you. This is the end of the episode about writing a simple academic article. If you liked what you heard, then you can find more videos in my Research Skills series, as well as other series on the topics of English and linguistics. Thank you for watching.